Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with School Transportation News. Welcome to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. We also have a great tech tip today from Premier Wireless, the experts in school bus technology solutions. And this is a very special episode, everybody, because we have the one and only Miss Taylor Hannon with us. Taylor, welcome.
Oh my gosh, I feel so special. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, Ryan's on vacation and Taylor has stepped in as our editorial extraordinaire, bringing us all the greatest news headlines. And she's also interviewing Eric Little, who's the transportation director at Baldwin County Schools in Georgia. So looking forward to that, Taylor.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. So he shed a lot of light into what's going on at Baldwin County. And we also featured his superintendent, Dr. Norris Price. She was one of the 4 finalists for the Superintendent of the Year award. So great to have that connection. That article is in April. So great tie-in.
Yeah, you know what, Taylor, always love to kind of make those connections between those great awards and the magazine and everything that we do. And guys, if you haven't checked out the latest and greatest issue, our April issue is out now and you can see the winner of the AASA Superintendent of the Year Award along with everybody else. So go over to the stnonline.com website to check that out. And guys, if you listen to this podcast on the regular, make sure and share it with your friends. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Share it on social media. Get it out. We love to get the word out about everything we are doing in the school transportation industry and share it with the masses. So we need your help to enlist all your friends in the industry to get more listeners and get you guys engaged. So we appreciate that. Also, reminder, conferences. They are coming up to summer. We are seeing lots of shows happening. We've got STN Expo Indianapolis, June 3rd through the 7th. You still got time to get our early bird rate and save $100. That closes at the end of April. And we've got great content planned, keynotes, a lot of stuff around electrification, a lot of stuff around safety, security. This is big topics facing the industry, and the conferences are great places to connect with peers and talk about all those trials and tribulations. And then also we've got STN Expo plus Green Bus Summit out in Reno, and that is a great place as well to connect on all things green, and that is July 15th through the 20th. You guys can go to stnexpo.com for all the details. And if you're a transportation director, we also have the Transportation Director Summit at both Indy and Reno. So that is free of charge to go to as long as you're a full conference registrant. So we would love to have you join us at the Transportation Director Summit. Before we dive into the headlines with Miss Taylor, I want to talk to you about TransFinder a little bit. They've got the trifecta available for you, which is Route Finder Plus, Stop Finder, Wayfinder, 3 solutions that work seamlessly together. Just look at everything that they have with routing software, parent app, driver app, inventory management solution, location intelligence, best maps on the planet. There's so much that they offer in that all-in-one solution. They are the provider for each and every school transportation department out there, and they want you to contact them. You guys reach out to TransFinder at getplus@transfinder.com by email, or you can call them at 800-373-3609 to find out more about how they can help you optimize those routes. Give them a call. All right, Taylor, shifting gears over to the headlines. There is a heck of a lot going on with electrification and green energy, zero emission. We saw a really great press release from Con Edison and some notable partners, I believe Lion Electric and Nuvve. Want to give us some insights on kind of the findings from that e-school bus project?
Yeah, so definitely very interesting. But it sounds like they took 5 electric buses and essentially took them to class, and then used the batteries to charge back to the grid. So this is kind of the big first finding, I want to say. I could be wrong. But essentially they've shared their vehicle to grid findings, and I'll be writing an article on this week. So you guys will be able to read more about that. And like you said, big players in the game. I reached out to National Express. They were a part of it as well to kind of get some feedback there. But yeah, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I know it's really spinning up. We talked about it last week a bunch about, a lot of the pilots going on and the larger orders, and when we hit on it too. And I've read a bunch of investment articles as well about the EV bus companies, and still all the global kind of impact to supply chain, rising prices of lithium ion batteries, this really ambitious $5 billion that's being deployed over the next 5 years for zero emission and low emission school bus technology, and kind of the access to that technology. And you see states like New York obviously mandate, that they want districts in the next 5 years to start buying strictly electric. I'm not really sure it's a one size fits all for every district, but the state legislature seems to believe that electric is kind of the future, and they're sure pointing a lot of the public policy for many to go that direction. So it's very interesting to me that that tends to kind of dominate the headlines as of late, with the more energy around electrification.
Yeah, definitely, Tony. I was at EV Fleet Day down in San Diego last week, and it was hosted by San Diego Gas and Electric. And I was talking to some people there, and they actually kind of gave me numbers for this vehicle to grid. And for each pole, it's like $200, right? And that's on the low end. I'm just lowballing it here. So if you think, let's say a district does 60 poles, right?
You're talking like electrical poles?
Yeah,
like the wooden poles.
No. Like the buses are being pulled back into the grid. The batteries are being pulled back, right?
Got it. I was confused. I was like, poles? What are you talking about?
Yes. That's what they used to explain it to me. So essentially, right? So $200 for every time the electricity is being pulled back into the grid. Let's say they do that 60 times a year on the low end. That's $12,000, right? Just for one bus. And I've never actually heard numbers be put out like that. So it was really interesting to actually put a figure to vehicle to grid and how it actually can benefit districts.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, Taylor. There's actually a dollar figure, $200 per bus. Did they say where that kind of number came from? How did they come to that?
Well, there are, like you said, pilot programs, but there are also school districts that are actually doing vehicle to grid. Like, it's not a magical idea anymore. Like, districts are utilizing it, districts are doing it, and districts are making it work. And I think with this Con Edison, announcement, I think it's going to be more of a prominent thing. I think we're going to see school buses, electric school buses, be pulled back into the grid, and school districts reap those benefits.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately what the study findings show is that there truly is a value there that school buses can provide, right? I think the question has always been, is V to G just all hype? Or is it actually like, does it really deliver on the promise? And that would be kind of getting electricity back to the grid. And obviously they talk about a little bit of lost transfer between batteries that occur, but really, if that is the consistent thing we saw over a multi-year period, they're really trying to model that and extrapolate out a much bigger kind of what if scenario. And I think as more of these findings come to light, it's going to really, really amplify people's interest in this solution, because I think people are still relatively apprehensive. Like, yeah, right. Can it really do that? Will it really bring me? And that money, where does that extra money go? Those $12,000 per bus, does that roll back up into transportation? Does that roll up at the school district level, kind of more, money in the classrooms? Because, at the end of the day, now school bus become income generating assets. And that really changes significantly kind of what that model has been for the last 100 years with school bus. So it really kind of has created this real kind of disruption in the market. And I'm very curious to see more kind of experiences, more environmental. California obviously is the ideal environment for electric based on the environment, the weather, kind of it depends on too the rural versus urban type of districts, right? We've seen more urban districts embrace electric maybe more than rural, which have longer extended routes. There's the range anxiety. There's all of that. So it's very interesting, but definitely we see more metropolitan cities jump on this bandwagon.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking with Lindsay Danner. She is the energy manager at Grossmont Union High School District here in California. And she was giving a presentation at EV Fleet Day. And she was saying that her district, so they have 67 buses, right? And her district spends just about $500,000 in diesel annually, right? So if you think about cutting that cost and going to electricity, how much, she'll save. It's ridiculous. They're looking at adding about 27 electric school buses within a year. So she'll have her first 17 in about a month. So I'm curious to kind of see how that's going to play out. And then, of course, in I think it was 5 years, they're going to be looking at vehicle to grid as well. So I'm curious, what those savings will be and how that will affect her district.
Yeah, and I think, again, the conversation becomes cost of vehicle. How do you enter the market? Do you have enough capital to go out and get those vehicles? Because obviously it's a much bigger CapEx expense, 2, 3, 4 times as much. We may see prices come down, but then you see comments come out from larger providers of EV vehicles in the consumer space. And, they say, nope, prices aren't going to come down. I know Daimler's CEO came out and said, expect EV prices kind of to remain higher. And, I think he's probably dead on, frankly, because as demand rises, it also depends on supply. And if demand exceeds supply, prices are going to remain high. So that's a very interesting dynamic to see that happening. I know we saw a headline come across that Boston targets 100% electrification of school buses by 2030. What's your take on that, Taylor?
I think we're going to be seeing it a lot more. I think we're going to be seeing these announcements that the school districts, states, cities, whatever it may be, are targeting, zero emissions by a certain date. I think we're just seeing some districts come out and say it now. But that you mentioned that was Boston Public Schools. It's launching a request to gain input on electrification strategies for its fleet of 739 school buses. So that's a lot of buses to go electric. Certainly it's going to be a process there.
Yeah, and I'm curious if states or cities will leverage bond measures and things of that nature, because obviously the Fed is not, maybe they're looking at the federal money, but there's no way they're going to be able to take all the federal money and leverage it against what they're trying to do. The state's going to have to pitch in money. And we saw some of that happen where, they steal from Peter to pay Paul, right? It's kind of like, oh, hey, the Fed is going to kick in a bunch of money for COVID solutions, but then the state decides to take money away to reallocate that to other places. So it's net neutral, right? So my fear is, are we going to see that happen as the Fed flows money down to school transportation? Are they going to say, okay, well, then I guess school transportation at the state level doesn't need as much money, so we're going to reallocate that other places. So this is the reality of how the budget game works. And I think a lot of districts are probably looking at their fiscal budgets. And you touched on fuel. Talk about a sticker shock, right? Diesel fuel jumping $1 and a plus. And, I'm not sure we're going to see it come down, right? We've seen it artificially maybe come down by some things, but, as the war in Ukraine kind of has been very protracted and longer than anyone I think ever expected, it really kind of just shows how delicate the system is when disruption happens and inflation. And there's just so many things working that are really going to impact school district budgets probably in the next fiscal year that are really going to hit home. And are they going to have to sacrifice other projects because money's being pulled into the paying of fuel. So they're having to give up that camera project or other project that they were planning on doing because of this kind of unexpected expense. So really interesting times to see kind of how everybody's kind of maneuvering their budgets to kind of address these rising costs.
And I know we wrote an article on that, a little earlier about how districts are having to allocate more money to diesel fuel as opposed to some of the projects that they were hoping to be able to get done this year. And, talking with Eric Little a little bit later, he kind of mentions that as well, that diesel prices are rising, but what does school transportation say? They get it done, right? And that's kind of like the motto. Yes, prices are rising, but it seems like school transportation, the people out there, they get it done. So I know he's really looking forward to the clean school bus program that is opening, I think, the end of this month. So he's hoping to get those federal funds that you were mentioning and help with electrification of his fleet. But like you said, there's money out there. Just got to tap into it.
Yeah, no, and I think also we saw some other comments with respect to, say, propane, right? So there's such a large propane fleet out there, 22,000 plus on the road today, is, electric isn't always maybe the right solution. Propane could be a solution as well. And obviously with 500 million of the billion a year, so 2.5 billion of that going towards potential low emission, which is eligible for propane, the cost is so much lower to acquire a propane bus than an electric bus. That's when you really have to crunch the numbers and see, hey, does propane more sense than electric? So really it's kind of public policy and politics driving towards the more expensive electric solution? Or do you really look at a more of an economic outlook and say, hey, propane's a better solution for me, for my situation, for my state, for my rural route versus an urban route? You really have to kind of dive deep and work with your partners to really identify what is the right fuel choice, right? Because really at this point, it's about fuel choice. Or do you even stick with diesel, right? There's all these new solutions, obviously, to try to lower emissions. And Ryan's touched on renewable fuels, like renewable diesel and things like that, which I think is only available in very select places. But we may see some of this in the future. We just don't know, if it's viable. But there's anxiety, right? You switch to electric and then it's like, wait, do I need my mechanics? Do I need my staff still? I don't want to displace people that have been tried and true in our department. So I think there's always stress as a manager or a leader when you make these really big transformational decisions. And you have to really step up, and managing your budget is huge. Looking at all the grants available at the state level, at the federal level. Also, you've got all these subsidies from partners. We're also seeing, SaaS-based things, software that manages mass materials as a service. So necessarily, you don't have to come up with all that upfront capital. There's companies that will help you access the technology at the current budget level you're at, but you kind of just got to adjust the model that you've been accustomed to.
And I want to bring up this interesting point from Lindsay when I was talking to her last week, because this never even crossed my mind. But she said with electric vehicles, the battery is stored underneath, right? So they're actually losing that underground compartment where kids put their sporting event things, their band equipment. And so I think she mentioned there might be one manufacturer that still has that underground compartment. But that's another thing to consider too. If you're having these kids to take their band equipment or their sporting bags on the bus, you're losing essentially a spot for another passenger.
Yeah, that's a great point, Taylor. There's just a lot of considerations you have to make these days with respect to what you're going to do with your fleet. Another big story, obviously, is ECF, right? We've talked about it on the last couple of episodes of the podcast. That's, basically your ability to access Wi-Fi technology. There's $1 billion available through the FCC to go out and apply for Wi-Fi on school buses. And that's a really big opportunity. If you guys don't have Wi-Fi already, that it's a way for you to access it for your students, right? For, that free and reduced lunch crowd or just general students. But what we heard from our interview last week with Lee Bogle from Premier Wireless was there's a real impact to student behavior, right? There's a real improvement that happens when children are conditioned to engage with maybe a device and absorb or consume content. So it's very interesting. Also, the ability to stack other technologies on the data stream to be able to take advantage of that funding to offset the cost maybe of some of the other equipment like live streaming cameras or GPS, some of the other tech that you might not realize. So there might be some other cost savings that are realized from taking advantage of the ECF funding for you. So it's really something that you guys should consider applying for when it comes out at the end of April, and it ends on May 13th. So I think it's April 28th, Taylor, and May 13th. Is that correct?
Yeah, those dates sound correct to me. So it's a very short window. And you hit it on the nose with the video cameras. I mean, I'm interviewing people for the May issue, and that's a huge thing. It's like live streaming video is not that popular right now. But if districts have the Wi-Fi, if districts get the Wi-Fi, that integration, getting that live streaming, huge.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit. There's a big story up on stnonline.com about 4G versus 5G. And that story right now is kind of like, do you need it? You know, if you have the money, go ahead and get that 5G. Well, the FCC is providing that money for you to get the 5G technology at the federal government's expense. If you have to just do it yourself, yeah, maybe 4G is good enough, right? You can get by, that's fine. But you're kind of future-proofing your school bus by adopting the 5G technology. So why not? If the money's there, it's use it or lose it. School transportation always says, hey, we never have money. We can't afford things. Well, here it is, guys, $1 billion to go get Wi-Fi and access a bunch of other technologies. And as Lee had mentioned from Premier Wireless on the last interview, there are other grants. There's a COPS grant. There's other things that can help you access some of these other technologies as well. So really interesting stuff. You know, and Premier Wireless is a sponsor this week of our tech tip. And, you know, they talk about Wi-Fi being everywhere except on the school bus. But why? Premier's Connect Ed Wi-Fi solution turns travel time into extended learning time, enabling students to study while riding on the bus to and from school, making them better prepared for class and improving those test scores. The Emergency Connectivity Fund provides the necessary funding to add Wi-Fi to your school buses. So make sure you apply. It's pretty much your last chance to apply for this funding. April 28th, closes May 13th. Give Premier Wireless a call today to help get started on the process. 281-667-0400. That's 281-667-0400, or visit them on premierwireless.com for all the great information. They also have a webinar coming up. You guys can glean that information too. With that, I'm going to leave it over to Taylor and Eric Little, Baldwin County Schools in Georgia. Looking forward to that conversation.
All right, so welcome to the podcast stage, Eric Little. He is the Transportation Director for Baldwin County Schools in Georgia. And Georgia's the Peach State, so great to have you here, Eric. Are you a Peaches fan?
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you on. And for those who are kind of familiar with Baldwin County Schools, their superintendent, Dr. Norris Price, was actually featured as one of the 4 superintendent finalists for the AASA. So we had her in the April issue. And so now it's even more special having Eric here with us so we can have both sides, talk a little bit both transportation and administration side.
Okay. Transportation side, for background information, like I say, we're a rural system in the middle of Georgia. We have almost 5,000 students in the district. We transport 1,700 of those students daily, and we run 36 routes, and we have a fleet of 49 buses. So that's kind of our operations.
Okay. And then I know before, we started recording, you said that you've been here since December 20th. So about 5 months. So what's kind of been going on? What's your background? Where were you before you got to Baldwin County?
My background is in education. Of course, I'm from Baldwin County. My bachelor's, master's, and specialist in education. Taught middle school and higher ed for 13 years. Did transportation for 8 years in a different district and had the opportunity to apply and was fortunate to be able to get a job here as transportation director back home in Baldwin County. So that's a little bit of my background information.
Yeah, so full circle, like I said before, you're back home.
That's correct. Full circle, glad to be back home.
Awesome. So kind of jumping off now, like I said, we highlighted your superintendent, Dr. Norris Price. So what has your experience been coming in, 5 months now? How's your experience been working with her?
My experience with Dr. Price has been wonderful. Like I say, she is an extremely brilliant person that values the intellect of her staff, and that goes a long way. She empowers her staff and so forth. And with that empowerment, that's going to enable us to do the best that we can and offer the best opportunity for our stakeholders, for our students. And, with her kind of leadership, she's going to empower us to do the best, and we're going to do the best all the time.
Why is it kind of an honor, to have her be recognized as one of the 4 finalists and being in that school district? How is it an honor for you guys, for the whole school district?
Well, it's always an honor to be with, what I would say a true leader who possesses such leadership skills, and to have her recognized as one of the top 4 finalists in the country. She fully supports us, and we're going to give her our full support. And we're just proud to be here and proud to be a part of her leadership,
Yeah, and it's, one of those things where it's superintendents don't always remember transportation, and it's not like they try to forget them, or it's not like they intentionally put them on the back burner, but having that superintendent who values you, supports you, and pushes you is huge.
It is. This is a very great environment to be in.
Awesome. So one of the questions that we asked Norris in the April issue was about the school bus driver shortage. And I know I called to talk to you one time, and your secretary, administrative assistant was like, "Oh no, he's on a route. He's driving." So clearly the school bus driver shortage is being felt there in Baldwin County if you're driving a route.
Yes, we have a national shortage of school bus drivers, and I think the pandemic, of course, has even heightened that shortage, and we have increased requirements for our CDL holders that also makes it more difficult to attract bus drivers, as well as, since we've seen the pandemic, we've seen the competitive shift in salary, where we're having to keep up with local businesses and make sure that we're able to offer our staff the amount of money to attract them to be able to drive and monitor and work on our buses and so forth. So that's been a challenge.
What are you guys short?
Right now, we're only short 4 out of the total allocations.
Okay.
Which means we do great. We may have to reinvent the wheel and have athletic trips and so forth, to field trips, but on a day-to-day basis, we're doing fine. Okay,
but are you taking on a daily route or just kind of filling in where needed?
Actually, I don't drive that often. Usually it's a field trip day or something. Most of the time, I'm just on the buses riding around my drivers and my monitors to make sure that they have what they need from me for student management and so forth, and just observe what's going on. So, but I don't mind driving, but I do not drive daily. No.
Oh, okay.
I'm available to, but no. Odd moment that I'll drive, but I am able to drive. So.
Okay. So you kind of sit on with them and help with the drivers in case they have any student management issues or anything kind of arises like that.
Of course. I'm going to give them my full support. They are an important asset to me. I couldn't do it without them. And in turn, I'm going to be there for them. That's what great leaders do. You support your people, your staff.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And a little earlier, before we started recording, you were talking about the Clean School Bus program and the EPA and all the funding that's available there. So what are you guys kind of looking at for alternative vehicles?
Well, for alternative vehicles, we're looking more for electric vehicles, because it'll be easier to develop the charging infrastructure here versus propane and so forth. There's some logistical challenges with getting propane set up in rural areas, so electric would be the way for us to go. We're also looking at, with this grant, federal grant, how to replace our more older units that we operate daily that create more pollution and so forth. So we just kind of go for more green footprint. So I'm looking at going zero emissions. So I'm focusing on total electric if we can get those through federal funding. But also know the cost of an electric school bus is near $400,000. So that federal money is definitely going to be a key component of us being able to access those units, and also with their funding for supporting the charging infrastructure as well, a key asset there that will hopefully allow us to move to a more greener carbon footprint. Also, even though those buses cost more, the operational cost is so much cheaper, so you don't have to be faced with that $4 a gallon diesel at 5-6 miles a gallon. You're charging for cents on a dollar. You have about 140-mile range, and you can recharge in 2.5 hours between routes during the day. So electric for city or our in-county routes is definitely ideal.
So in an ideal world or a perfect world, how many of those electric school buses would you have like to get with the funding?
Well, ideally, I'd like to replace the entire fleet, but I know that I can't do that. So I'm going to focus on writing that grant for our older units, which would take out our 2007 through 2010 buses. But also I know that, like I say, for long range trips, right now electric buses just can't make it from here to Atlanta or South Georgia.
Right.
So I do know that I have to hold on to a few diesels for those situations.
Mm-hmm. And so you're running all diesel then right now?
Yes, we're all diesel right now.
Okay. And you mentioned the $4 gas prices. So has that been impacting you guys?
I mean, we've been, we deal with it. We're going to operate, and we're going to roll, and we're going to run, and so it's we're on our normal schedule. But of course, we see that influx in pricing, where the price of a tanker of fuel has doubled since January.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a financial hit for sure. Yeah,
and that clean school bus program, that's coming up here quickly. The application, I think, opens later this month. So
yes, it does.
Yeah, definitely something to be on the lookout for if anyone else is listening. And I know you mentioned that as a rural district, they're kind of giving priority to rural districts, low-income districts. So hopefully you can soak all that in.
Hopefully, and that's a major difference from what we've seen in the past. Usually it's the metropolitan areas, but to see the focus on the rural districts is, very exciting for us.
Yeah. And then kind of, talking more about federal funding, Norris, your superintendent, kind of added that they used ESSER funds at your district to help pay for signing and retention bonuses for staff. Did transportation see any of that?
Yes, they did see it. They offer bonuses based on tenure. I know the staff members that had 2 years or more, they've got a $1,000 bonus back in December to help out there. So I know there's future plans to make sure we remain competitive and maintain and attract and keep the best. But yes, those funds were used for our entire department.
Yeah, I'm sure that was good feeling all around. Everyone was probably excited to get that.
Oh, yes, they're very excited and always a great feeling.
Yeah, especially when it's coming from administration, recognizing school bus drivers like, hey, you guys are out there on the front lines, like, here's this bonus.
That's right.
Right, perfect. So before I let you go, Eric, you just got into the position 5 months ago, but what is your kind of wish list technology wise? You got a long list of things that you want, or are you guys pretty technology advanced over there?
Well, I mean, we have the tracking software. We use Zonar that tracks our buses, satellite tracking. So the live view, so it's pretty cool. I can watch where every unit is at any given moment. Now, if there's software that gives turn-by-turn directions, I would love to be able to have that to preload all our routes in to every bus. So whether it's a regular driver or sub-driver, they would know exactly where to go without a doubt to make sure they're not missing a turn. Also, I would like the ability to be able to basically more accurately track student ridership, whether it's scan in and scan off. But I know that those are all costly ventures, but definitely we know it's kind of enhance our awareness of who's on and when and so forth, and when they would get off, or just in case, if there were a sub driver that wouldn't know that student, they're on or off at a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I wrote an article about RFID cards and student tracking, and it's just a peace of mind for districts and families to be able to know what buses their students are on.
Exactly.
All right, Eric. Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you coming on to talk with us and shed a little light into your operation. Once again, congratulations to Baldwin County and to Dr. Norris for being recognized. Such an honor, and such an honor to have you on as well.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, special thanks to Taylor and Eric for joining us today on the podcast. Special shout out to our sponsors, TransFinder and Premier Wireless. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting. Make sure, listeners, nation, take care of our sponsors. Go check out transfinder.com, premierwireless.com for all that great information that they've got for you. Also visit stnonline.com for everything happening in the school transportation industry. And you can also learn all about all the upcoming conferences this summer. stnexpo.com to register today. Take advantage of all the discounts we have early bird for you coming up this summer. Don't forget, you can stream, follow, tell all your friends about this podcast. stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We love you, nation. Thanks for coming, listening to us every week. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week.